A brave new hope for Britain, or just a rebranded version of the Tories? 3 high-profile Conservative Party MPs have defected to Reform in the past 3 weeks alone. It's the latest sign of Reform UK's growing popularity. But does it also signal an identity crisis? I'm Melinda Nucifora. You're watching Counterpoints. Reform UK continues to gain traction on a promise to fix what it calls broken Britain. And its newest recruits agree it's time to do things differently.
So we stand at a crossroads. We can either continue down this route of managed decline to weakness and surrender, or we can fix our country, reclaim our power, rediscover our strength.
Because the two main parties are rotten. They are no longer fit for purpose. They both broke Britain, and neither can fix it.
But in order to rebuild the country, Reform UK is welcoming politicians who were part of the system that it says broke Britain in the first place. The Tories were in power for 14 years until its election defeat in 2024, and a growing list of its former MPs are defecting to the new party on the rise. So will Reform threaten the century-old two-party system in the UK, or will it do little more than split the vote on the right? Coming up on this episode, we'll debate if Reform is at risk of becoming just the Tories 2.0. Meanwhile, on the left is a leadership challenge still looming large over PM Keir Starmer. And with turmoil on both sides of politics, is the two-party system doomed? Joining our UK politics debate is Dr. Richard Corbett, former Labor Party leader in the European Parliament. Gawain Towler is here with us, political strategist and Reform UK board member. And Reem Ibrahim is joining our panel, political commentator and former head of media at the Institute of Economic Affairs. Welcome to all of you to Counterpoints. Well, Reform UK's time in the sun certainly isn't dimming. Opinion polls still have it ahead of the two major parties. Nigel Farage is promising a fresh start and a program to revive a so-called broken Britain. To do that, Reform is welcoming defectors from the very party that presided over years of that decline. Tory defectors are lining up to join the party, and it seems they're being given a second political life. Gawain, is Reform becoming the Tories 2.0?
Not really. I mean, you've got to... if you're making bread, you need a little bit of yeast. One of the great criticisms of Reform is that we are inexperienced. So we accept some experiences. Oh, no, you can't have that. That's the wrong sort of experience. No, look, you need 650 candidates to stand in Westminster for a general election. I think we've had 5 Tory defections of that 650. We've had a number of former MPs, about 5 or 6 who I think will probably try and stand for us. This is not a large number. This is not Tories 2.0. However, getting people like Nadhim Zahawi, who has been a former Chancellor of the Exchequer, who has forced through activity through Whitehall, a very recalcitrant Whitehall, and made things happen. This is the sort of experience you need if you want to be taken seriously as a government in waiting. OK. Richard, with your experience in one of the two major political parties, do you think that this is candidates that are the leftovers that Tories don't want or need anymore, or are these prime picks, do you think, for Reform?
Well, it's a bit funny, isn't it? You would think that Reform has become the retirement home for some of these Conservative former ministers. a majority of Reform's MPs now are from the Conservative Party, ministers who, when they were in government, were precisely the people that Reform attacked as leading to the decline of Britain, as having got it all done, using some quite choice words about them as well, and vice versa. They said some pretty rude things about Reform. And yet now, apparently, they're all happily working together. They're going to forget all their past differences. It does seem rather opportunistic.
Reem, I'm going to bring you in here, but Gawain, pick up on that. I know you you were interjecting there. Is it a bit of a retirement home for politicians?
Clearly not. So if you look at somebody like Robert Jenrick, he is the most cut through of Tory politicians. This is not somebody in a retirement home. This is somebody who actually wants to change the country. Now, it's possible that he sees that Reform is a better place to do so than the moribund Conservative Party. That's entirely true. But those things, when he had his he resigned from the government because he wasn't able to do what he wanted to do, which is the sort of things we want to do, he had to resign from his position as a minister. So it's hardly, he's not going against the grain there.
The Conservatives are not in government.
He was a shadow minister. As you will know, Richard, you don't get much done as a shadow minister, do you? But the chance of winning the next general election is less a Tory thing than a Reform thing. And the reasons he resigned from his ministerial post when he was a minister was because he couldn't do the things that we are proposing.
Reem?
It's understandable, I think, that Reform would want to have people with experience in parties and people experience in government. I must say, just looking at people in the grassroots of the movement and people that are looking at the local branches at Reform, a lot of Reform members are very upset that Reform HQ continues to accept the very politicians that were in government over the last 14 years of Conservative governance. So I do think there is some disquiet about it. Perhaps not about people like Robert Jenrick, but there is absolutely disquiet about people like Nadine Dorries, who is the architect of the Online Safety Act, one of the most egregious pieces of legislation that has stifled free speech online. She was the architect of that very policy, and is one policy that Nigel Farage himself has criticised. I also must say, I think that there is a difficult conversation to be had about whether or not these personalities within Reform will actually work well together. You know, the fact that Robert Jenrick didn't get the top job in the Conservative Party, I think is very, very clear to many people that he wasn't happy about that he almost certainly was running his own leadership election, even post the official one, because he didn't think that Kemi Badenoch was really right to lead the Conservative Party. He realised he wasn't going to go anywhere when Kemi Badenoch started to do quite well, especially when she did quite well at Prime Minister's questions. And so, lo and behold, he decides to defect somewhere where he thinks he may be able to get some more power. The trouble is, Reform UK is nothing without Nigel Farage. And I don't see people like Robert Jenrick, who, let's be honest, outside of the Westminster bubble, most people don't know who he is. They will not do particularly well in Reform. So I think it's going to be interesting to see whether or not those personalities will actually be able to work well together.
Okay, Gawain, what do you think?
Well, I mean, he's probably the only...
Oh, sorry.
Jenrick is probably the only person that people have heard of, unlike people like Mel Stride, the Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer, who, frankly, unless you're in the bubble, you've never heard of him. When there was, infamously, during the Tory leadership, Lord Ashcroft did a focus group of Tory members, and they said, Mel Stride, who's she? And he's the number 2 figure in the Tory party right now. So that's, I'm sorry, Reem, that's bunk. The fact is that there is disquiet in the membership. I would agree with that. I think the fact that we have set a May the 7th of this year cutoff for a 2029 election of any further defections, I think is something that deals with that disquiet. And there will be time. Now, we have made it absolutely clear.
You're also going to hold by-elections for the defectors.
Sorry?
Will you also hold by-elections for the defectors, as Farage had promised initially?
We haven't done, clearly. That's how. If we were going to, we probably would have done when Danny Kruger came over. So, no, clearly not. But the point is
despite it being promised,
branches will be making decisions. We didn't promise that. What are you talking about?
Nigel Farage was a long-standing supporter of there being by-elections if somebody defected from one party to another. Now he seems to have changed its mind when it's no longer convenient.
It happened twice in 2014. You'll remember it very well, Richard. You were doing well.
Yeah,
in the
I'm
European
just noting
Parliament.
his change of position when it doesn't suit him
Well,
anymore.
yes, but
The
there's
other
many
problem, I
change
think,
positions
for Nigel Farage and for Reform is that
I,
if we've seen this
no
in the
party
past,
does that.
when
You know that
when
your
he was
party
leader of
doesn't. The Tories
UKIP and
don't.
then
We
the
haven't. We
Brexit
don't. So
Party, is that
it's a
many
silly
people
thing.
who come and join to work with him, he falls out with them after a few months, and it all ends in tears. We'll see if that happens again.
Well, they fall out so badly they're flocking to join. I'm sorry, that's bunk again. Yes, people do fall out, but you know what? In small parties, the vociferous nature of them is such that people do fall out. That is the nature of the beast. As Reform grows, there's far more space for people to have different ideas and grow together. I haven't seen any problems of that sort, but I do take the point that Reem made, which is in the membership there is some concern, but that is a little bit like the church mouse who's sitting there all year, existing on candle ends and incense sticks, and suddenly there's all these people that turn up, and all the field rats turn up because it's Harvest Festival. What are they doing here? We were here from the start, but that is the sort of attitude. Yes, we are pure, but we will never be in a position to legislate. It's the sort of Corbynite idea.
But
and I'm sorry.
the trouble is,
if we wish to
Reform
win,
is
we
an
have to grow.
anti-establishment party, and Reform is there to represent the people that were left behind, those that were not represented by the two main political parties, those that were harmed by mass amounts of government spending, extraordinarily high taxes. Why are Reform accepting the very people that were the architects
They're
of
not
that
the very
legislation?
people. There's not.
And
This isn't Jeremy Hunt.
People like
This
Nadine
isn't people like
Dorries,
that.
who was front and centre at Reform Conference.
Of one piece of legislation, yes. I think there are reasons why, in each case, there are reasons why people have been accepted, and about 30% have been turned down.
Nadine Zahawi, who wanted vaccine passports.
And who was the Chancellor?
We oppose that. And if they're going to join us, they have to accept that it's a change of policy on their part.
All right. Well, this
have
isn't
to grow.
only.
You're not
I'm sure
going
your
to get
grassroots
14 million
members, your
votes
traditional
from the right-hand
grassroots
side
members,
of the
Gawain,
party.
will be delighted to have heard you refer to them as dormice who are too timid about the new members coming in. I'm sure that's gone down really well with them.
I said church mice, Richard. I didn't say dormice.
Church mice, yes. I'm sure they'll have loved
The metaphor is that they have been there forever and these newcomers are arriving and what are they doing there? But the fact is I've been there forever and I welcome people. I want to win. I don't want to be sitting in a little ivory tower being pure and not changing the world. This country desperately needs change.
What do you achieve by reneging on those principles, Gawain? I mean, the problem is...
I'm not reneging on any principles, but we do need the experience of Whitehall. Everybody, the main reason that people attack us is not having experience. We get experience and, no, you can't have that. Where do you get it from?
What will be different? What will be different when Reform gets into government? Those particular people like Robert Jenrick and Nadine Dorries and Nadine Zahawi did not want experience. What will be different?
There's a lot. There's a lot.
Like what?
All right.
What has changed?
I'll let you quickly respond to that, Gawain, and then I want to move us on a little bit.
I refer back to the first comment I made about this. We have 5 defections from the Tory party. We need 350 odd seats to be in government. 5. This is a leavening. This is a bit of yeast in the flour. This is not the bread. The vast, vast majority will be homegrown Reform people. But having a few people who've got experience of Whitehall will be desperately necessary when you know the establishment will be doing everything it can to stop Reform governing.
OK, but this is not only about Reform taking in the defectors, this is also about the Conservative Party losing its membership. So, Richard, let me ask you this, on that flip side of the coin, is this a moment of rejuvenation or is it a moment of collapse for the Conservative Party?
Well, we will see, but they are certainly in a bad way after their disastrous period in government. Disastrous not just on the policies they were running, but on some of the scandals and the corruption that has left a stain which is very difficult for them to overcome. But tellingly, a lot of the switch in support among voters, not all of it, but the largest proportion has been between the Conservatives and Reform on the right of the political spectrum. On the centre and the left of the political spectrum, there's movement between people who voted Labour, perhaps shifting to the Greens, the Liberal Democrats, the Scottish Nationalists, the Welsh Nationalists. But between those two blocks, there is relatively little switch between them. So that's an interesting feature of British politics at the moment. We'll see what happens over the next 3 years. But if it ends up with all the right-wing support going into one box, as it were, either the Conservatives or Reform, that will give that party a big advantage given the British electoral system. If, however, they split pretty evenly, and if Labour, on the other hand, manages to recoup some of the support it's losing to the Greens and to the Lib Dems, then Labour will be in a strong position. In both cases, thanks largely to the British non-proportional electoral system, but it is something to be watched.
Gawain, what do you think? Does this say more about reform, or does it say more about the failings of the Conservative Party?
Oh, I don't believe that any government wins its first election on its own merits. It's on the failures of those that came before. You win a second term on your own merits, not the first term. And the failures of 14 years of the Tory government, plus, frankly, the current shambles that is Labour. Richard talked about the Tory scandals. Yeah, you're right. But have you seen this week? And it is a universal fact that it seems like parties of government get themselves into horrible trouble. You've had people arrested for sexual misconduct. You've had somebody found guilty in absentia for corruption. There's all sorts of stuff going on in Labour. No, look, people. One of the pollsters, a senior pollster, made a good point about this. It's not that people think that Reform are perfect. They don't. But the risk factor in voting for a party that doesn't have a track record in government is reduced every time the old parties make a hash of it. The risk of voting for Reform is reducing every time the Labour Party has a U-turn. Every time. So things like that, it's a case of, well, you know, they haven't done it before. They don't have the full experience. They've never been in government before. But have you seen the current lot? You know what? We may as well vote for Reform and give them a shot. So there is a lot of risk.
People looking at
for us has
lots of people looking at Reform.
People, and I put myself in this particular. I'll put myself in this particular camp. Lots of people aren't bothered that Reform do not have experience in government. Actually, I quite like the idea that it's a bunch of people that have never been in government before, that have not been poisoned by the establishment perspectives on how government should be run and how large it should be.
I mean, that's worked for President Trump's administration, second time around.
And you can say Macron's administration.
This is the trouble, right? When you've got enormous amounts of public spending, I mean, what somebody like me cares about is a smaller state and lower taxes and a freer market. And unfortunately, we do not have those things in this government. But if Reform do not remain with those principles and do not sort of stick to them. I mean, one difference I think is interesting in policy is Reform around the 2024 election in the manifesto or the contract with the people said that they wanted to introduce, what was it, about £90 billion worth of tax cuts. And that's completely been reneged upon. That was completely U-turned on because apparently we can't afford it. We can't afford it because the Reform did not promise any spending cuts. What I would like to see is a genuinely low tax party. And I don't think that any party is offering those policies.
Well, we're talking literally today, we're talking about significant cuts in welfare. So, yeah, we're doing it.
Richard,
Gawain was talking about government U-turns, but if people will also look at the U-turns done by Reform in the local government areas that they control. They came to power in several local government areas 9 months ago, a bit less than 8 months ago, promising to cut council tax, local taxation in Britain substantially. They've ended up invariably increasing it.
By less than
the other parties. To be fair, a lot of the majority of local
at national level on, for example, child benefit.
But the majority
when
of
Labour extended child benefit to
legally
beyond the
required by
first
the
two
state.
children to the third child.
All right, I'm just going to interrupt us there and move us away from local politics because we've got to move on to our second segment because we've talked a lot about Reform and the Conservative Party. But But they're not alone in facing some inner turmoil, just as the Tories, aren't alone either. The Labor Party is still delivering disappointing poll numbers. And as Gawain has been pointing out, there's a lot of discontent among voters. Despite his landslide victory in 2024, Prime Minister Keir Starmer just can't shake this looming cloud of a leadership challenge. Richard, let's turn our attentions now to Labor. Is a challenge for the top job now a matter of when, not if?
Well, Labour doesn't have a strong tradition of challenging its leaders when they are in government. So although there's been a lot of media speculation and one or two people who may fancy themselves as Prime Minister, it's not that likely, but of course it's politics, it's possible. But at the moment, in coming months at least, I don't see a challenge emerging.
Reem, what do you think?
I don't think that there will be a challenge to the leadership at the moment, and I think that Starmer has effectively stopped that from happening by blocking Andy Burnham, the Manchester mayor, from being able to stand in the Gorton by-election. So, Starmer has basically, temporarily at least, kicked the can down the road and prevented any kind of leadership challenge internally. I do think, though, effectively what Starmer has done by doing this is made people like Wes Streeting the sort of de facto successor to Starmer. So I do think that there is question about whether or not Starmer is sort of able to consolidate power within the Labour Party as well as he might hope. When it comes to policy, it is almost abundantly clear that the backbenchers of the Labour Party are not being whipped in the right way, I suppose. I mean, what's interesting is the benefits cuts. They attempted to implement very, very minuscule benefits cuts about a year ago now, I think it was, and almost a year ago. And it wasn't, they weren't able to get it through because the backbenchers on the Labour Party sort of rebelled against the government. And unfortunately, it meant that they weren't able to introduce those cuts. And actually, what ended up happening is an increase in public spending on welfare. So I do think that Starmer is struggling to consolidate power within the Labour Party internally, but I do not think that there will be a genuine challenge to Starmer's leadership, at least over the next year or so. Only time will tell, but I think that he's effectively blocked the main challenger from even standing for Parliament. So he looks like he's sort of operating from a weak position, but at least in the short term, he's kicked the can down the road.
Gawain, I know that this isn't your political party here, but from Reform's point of view, what's your impression? Is this a matter of when, not if?
I think what is happening over Lord Mandelson, or the former Lord Mandelson, I think he's resigned from the House of Lords this afternoon, and the fact that Morgan McSweeney, who is Starmer's brain, is so intimately involved in the appointment of Lord Mandelson to the ambassadorship in Washington, the damage to Morgan McSweeney is great, and it's entirely feasible over the next few weeks that we will see McSweeney being the sacrificial lamb to protect his boss. The problem is without him, Starmer is completely naked to his opponents. And whilst I would have agreed with both of you up until this moment, I think if McSweeney goes, then Starmer is in real, real trouble. And though he has been able to stymie the ambitions of Andy Burnham, before Christmas, it wasn't Burnham they were talking about. Then they were talking about Angela Rayner and her raising money this weekend. And then, so there's more than one. There's more than one opponent in the field for Mr. Starmer. And if he loses Morgan McSweeney, I feel that he may well be in real trouble.
Richard?
Prime Ministers frequently change their chief advisor. That's nothing exceptional, and I don't think that in itself would damage the Prime Minister.
What about the resignation of Lord Mandelson? Is that going to tarnish his leadership, Labour as a whole?
Yeah, well, Peter Mandelson had historically been a significant figure under the Blair and Brown governments. It was unfortunate that he was asked to come back to serve as ambassador to Washington for a short period. It's right that he's gone. It's right that he's no longer a Labour Party member. It's right that he's no longer a member of the House of Lords. Everybody in the Labour Party was shocked by the recent revelations, and it's right that he's gone. But, you know, he has gone, that has been dealt with.
Did Starmer already know about these relationships that he had with
if he'd known that, he would never have risked appointing him to that position.
Are we sure about that? Are we certain about that? I mean, there's a question about whether or not Starmer was aware of any of this.
Do something like that if he knew. He wouldn't. It would be wrong morally, and it would be a huge risk politically. So
the question is whether or not Starmer himself saw it.
No, Starmer was not informed, was not aware of what had happened. If he was, he would never have made such an appointment, neither morally nor in terms of politics, because it would have been a stupid thing to do politically if he had known about it.
I asked a simple question. Do you believe that the appointment of our most important diplomatic post, that is our ambassador to Washington, that the Prime Minister was not briefed by MI6 or MI5?
I expect he was briefed by MI6 or MI5, but they were presumably not aware of this.
The strong likelihood is that he did know something.
No, almost certainly did not know, because he would not have taken such a risk, and he would not have done it on moral grounds.
He takes a lot of
saying that perhaps the civil servants hid it from him.
He would not have taken such a decision.
I'm not as sanguine as you.
So did the civil servants hide the information from him? I mean, it is undoubtedly untrue that it's just really, really quite unbelievable to think that there is absolutely no evidence or indeed no information about Mandelson's relationship with Epstein at all. So the evidence, there was information
Gordon
there.
Brown talked about it in September.
Did anybody tell? Yeah, exactly. When we have been talking about it for a very long time.
Gordon Brown reported it to Number 10 in September.
Did they hide it from Starmer? Did Starmer steal and choose to ignore it?
Playing this up, but and making insinuations and so on. But the fact is that the Prime Minister was not made aware of all the continued relationship with Epstein by Mandelson after the conviction, and some of the recent stuff that's come out in the last couple of days. Nobody was aware of that.
Frankly, even if the Prime Minister is ignorant of any of these things, we do know that Peter Mandelson, this is the third or fourth sacking. He's been sacked almost as many times as I have. His character. He's a brilliant man, is Peter Mandelson. As a brilliant man, I remember
that's
him.
One reason why the Prime Minister was
very able. He's a very able man, but he is also deeply flawed. He loves money and power. And if what it appears that he was sending essentially state secrets about the security architecture of Whitehall and Number 10 out of this country, that is such a serious offence. And I can't believe that MI6 and MI5 were completely
nobody has suggested that was known before it came out in the last 48 hours. Nobody has suggested that the Prime Minister knew about that or anybody else knew about that. That is new information.
Richard, what sort of fallout do you think there is likely to be now? Would you expect some sort of investigation? Do you think that the Prime Minister is going to have to face some very tough questions about this? I mean, what would you envisage to now be the fallout from these revelations?
Well, I expect the Prime Minister will take a very tough line and ask for as much information as possible, perhaps an inquiry. I mean, the Prime Minister was very keen to get him out of the House of Lords and out of the Labour Party. So I don't think there will be any love lost between them. The Prime Minister is appalled by what has been revealed about Peter Mandelson, as we all are, not in the Labour Party, right across the Labour Party, and of course beyond. The only difference is that those beyond, those in other parties, of course, want to play this up and make all kinds of insinuations that the Prime Minister knew all about this from the very beginning, which plainly he didn't.
Well, he blatantly knew that Peter Mandelson was highly flawed, having been fired twice before for dubious activities involving money.
Yeah, well, the second time he was fired, there was an inquiry afterwards which eventually exonerated him. So don't make it sound more simple than it actually is.
It was a judgment call. It was a judgment call about, yes, we know that Peter is flawed, but he is brilliant. And it was a judgment.
Yeah, you say he was brilliant.
We don't know what the advice the
those are
Prime
your
Minister
words,
received.
and I expect that's the aspect that led to the Prime Minister appointing him for this very delicate task of dealing with a maverick president in the USA and trying to rescue something for Britain in that relationship. So I can see why the Prime Minister thought, on advice,
it will,
maybe that's
in
the right
the public's
thing to do.
eye,
But had he known about this, he would never have dreamt of risking it, and he wouldn't have done it on moral grounds either.
Okay. Reem, a comment from you before I move us on?
Well, I think Wayne is right in this respect, because fundamentally this is a question about whether or not Starmer exercised the right judgment when appointing Mandelson. And, it was abundantly clear that at least some of his relationship with Epstein, we didn't know the full extent of it, of course, but some of that relationship was already known. And the question is, either Starmer himself was aware of it and decided to make a different decision, or civil servants downplayed the relationship or indeed tried to hide some of that information from Starmer. Either way, it doesn't look very good for the Prime Minister.
A right of reply to you, Richard, and then I'm going to move us on to our third segment.
Well, I think I've already made it clear what I thought. The Prime Minister was not aware of all the details. Had he been aware, he would never have made such a decision. For one, on moral grounds, he's a very moral person, Keir Starmer, whatever else you think about him. Nor would he have taken such a political risk. Of course not. Of course he wouldn't have done that had he known.
Well, this sort of scandal, if you like, the questions raised about Labor Party members and their links to certain figures, the continued rise of reform, it all feeds into this commentary around the future of the two-party system itself. It has been a battle between the two major parties for more than a century. And although this isn't the first time there's been a third contender, it certainly feels like the most serious challenge we've seen to the status quo in a long time. Reem, do you think that questions around Peter Mandelson and his links to Epstein, the defections from the Conservative Party, the rise of reform, is this all a signal that people are fed up with the two-party system? Is it going to die out in the UK?
I think people are fed up of not feeling as though they're getting better off. They are not better off now than they were 10 years ago. We know this from the economics of Great Britain. When we're looking at the fact that public spending as a proportion of GDP is now at about 45%, which means that almost half of the economy is the government. And we are spending enormous amounts of money, regulating enormously. And people, as a result, are not better off. Now, of course, part of this is the fallout from Brexit. Now, only last Saturday, it was 6 years since the UK actually left the European Union. And many people voted for Brexit so that the country could take back control of power, take back control of our sovereignty, ensure that the pathway towards prosperity was a pathway we could choose to take without being held back by the shackles of Brussels. Now, what we have discovered is that our own governments in Whitehall and Westminster were almost just as protectionist and just as pro-regulation and pro-government and pro-sort of establishment thinking as Brussels. So what people voted for didn't occur. We've now been left with an enormous number of levers, and nobody has had the guts to pull a single one of them. So now people are looking at this and saying, okay, what we need is to shake up our own governance. We need to shake up our own power domestically. And I think that the rise of reform, the increasing support that reform are getting, is in part the backlash from people not feeling as though they are better off, but also this new rise in anti-establishment thinking. And it's, by the way, why I think accepting too many Tory defections will bode very, very badly for reform.
All right, Gawain, I'm going to come to you in just a moment. But Richard, being from one of the established major parties with a long history in politics, do you see this as the time that the major parties are under the most pressure in sort of modern history?
The Conservatives are for the reasons we discussed earlier. Labour is because they're in government, and governments tend, especially mid-term, to be unpopular. No more so, of course, than when they have to take very difficult decisions. Labour inherited a real difficult situation economically from the Conservatives, with the public finances in dire straits, and with the economy hit by a number of things, not least Brexit. Brexit was supposed by those who supported it, including, I think, my interlocutors in this debate now, it was going to save Britain lots of money, which would all go to the NHS, by the way. We were going to have wonderful new trade deals with countries across the world to replace the trade deals we have negotiated collectively as Europe with the leverage of the world's largest market. We were going to keep all our access to the single European market. We wouldn't lose any of it, our main trading partner.
Our main trading partner is the US.
And the OB, the Office of Budgetary Responsibility, had estimated that Britain's GDP is probably around 4%, maybe 5% smaller than it would have been had we stayed in the European Union.
Richard, I'm just going to turn you back to the point. We're not going to get into a whole Brexit debate. That has come and gone, so we're not going to reanalyse Brexit. Richard, I want you to answer for me.
That would have delivered about £40 billion extra tax revenue every year.
OK, we're not going to go back and dissect Brexit because the ship has sailed on that one, Richard. But tell me, Richard, do you think that the two-party system is under threat?
Transformed the economic situation and the situation of public finance.
All that by the by, Richard, is the two-party system under threat?
Well, in that both the traditional main party on the right is in dire straits, and Labour, being in government, is not doing, as is usually the case for parties in government in Britain, not doing very well. There is a threat. Labour, I think, has every opportunity to turn the corner. It's still got 3 years to go. It's doing what it can to turn around the economy. It's doing what it can to address people's concerns in terms of the state of public services, the NHS, and so on. So it's possible, but it's by no means certain that we're seeing the end of the two-party system, at least as regards Labour on the centre left.
If you want to be more like the Europeans, then you want multiple parties.
All right, Gawain, do we want multiple parties? Is it the end of the two-party system? Is that a good thing?
I'll go to your first question. My feeling is, though pollsters and others will tell you that British politics is fragmenting, with the Greens, the Lib Dems, Reform, Tories, Labour, instead of the two-party system. My feeling is it's a little bit more a realignment. And I can see, just as Reform are an electoral threat to Labour, and look at the by-election last year in Runcorn, or maybe this election in Manchester this month, we are an existential threat to the Tories. And in the same way, the Green movement, which Labour are terrified of winning in Gorton, provide an existential threat to Labour. Talking to Labour people I know, they are working their socks off. It's bad enough being beaten by Reform, but we don't threaten their heart. If they're beaten by the Greens in Gorton, then that threatens their heart. And what I think you might see is maybe we go back to a two-party system, but it's not those two parties.
All right, Reem, I'm going to come to you in a moment, but I want to hand that over to you, Richard. Is there a risk? I mean, we talk about the splitting of the vote on the right. Could we be looking at a split on the vote on the left?
Yes, certainly the support that Labour has lost, according to polls, has gone predominantly to the Greens and the Liberal Democrats, or in Wales and Scotland, to the nationalist parties, not to the Conservatives or Reform. most of it. So if there is a threat to Labour, it's from parties on the centre and the left, not from the parties on the right. That's more a battle between the Conservatives and Reform. So Labour is aware of that. It will be, of course, arguing and conducting policies to make sure that it attenuates that risk.
Reem, you raised the idea that if, you know, the Europeans have more of a multi-party system than the UK, is that something the UK should aspire to? Would it work in the UK? And what do you make of Gawain's comment there that there could be a two-party system, but it might not be the two parties we're used to?
Yeah, I don't think that'll be the case. I think we're probably going to see a split in the vote on the right and a split in the vote on the left. I think we are going to see more multiple parties. I don't think that Reform are going to get a majority at the next election. I think that we're probably going to see a hung parliament, one in which we'll have to have a minority government in some form of coalition. And I don't mind that. I mean, I think that what's interesting is in the majority of European countries, you do have multiple parties that then form a coalition, predominantly because of the way that their electoral system works. And I think that in the UK, that's perfectly reasonable to expect. I don't think that Reform are going to win absolutely every single current Conservative seat. One example that comes to mind, by the way, is somebody like Jack Rankin, who is the Member of Parliament for Windsor. He was Robert Jenrick's PPS, his sort of private secretary in Parliament, and lots of people have said, well, he should be on defection watch. But when you actually look at his constituency, the main threat in Windsor is not Reform, it is the Liberal Democrats. And so there are many, many Conservative members of Parliament who are currently in the party and currently sitting in Parliament that will not have Reform in their constituencies. One example, by the way, is Danny Kruger, who did defect to Reform. I can't see him keeping his seat.
I know, it rather kills the idea he did it for his career, doesn't it? Maybe he just did it because he believed in it.
Perhaps, but it also means that Reform won't win that seat. So Reform probably will not get a majority.
Same with Jenrick and Newark. Yeah, and
Perhaps,
so
yeah.
the idea that they're doing it to save their careers, actually, no, they're doing it because they believe in it.
Perhaps, but perhaps that is true. But it also does mean that Reform, just on this issue of the multiple party system, it does also mean that this idea that Reform are going to completely engulf the Conservatives and the two-party system will be dead because Reform will take over, I just don't think is true. I think what will happen is Reform and the Conservatives will split the vote. You'll get moderate Conservatives still voting for the Tories, and you will have those that care more about the economy voting for the Conservatives. Those that care more about immigration will vote for Reform. And on the left, you will see more people that care about the establishment, that are probably Blairite, will vote Labour. And those that want to see the UK completely go green, or indeed pro-Gaza, they will end up voting Green. And that's how the electoral system will look after the next election.
It is an excellent crystal ball. We're almost out of time, so let me put that proposition very briefly to our other two panellists. Gawain, what do you foresee? I mean, maybe if I can narrow it down, do you think you'll have more Tory party defectors coming Reform's way before the May deadline? I
wouldn't be at all surprised. I really wouldn't, but maybe not. It doesn't matter. I would say of the 120 or 115 Tory MPs that are left, I wouldn't take more than 4. That being said, I would take Jack Rankin. Yes.
Well, we'll keep our eyes out on that one. Richard, round us out. I mean, we had quite a detailed crystal ball there from Reem. Give us your impression. Election is a long way away, but what does Keir Starmer need to do to keep things on track?
Well, first, I think Reem's analysis is right to a large degree on where the support is shifting. Now, if we had proportional representation like other European countries, that would lead to coalitions being made to secure majorities in Parliament. Parties would have to compromise, and perhaps that wouldn't be a bad thing at all. But the danger is that given our electoral system, first past the post, non-proportional, there's a risk that a party could win a majority of seats on 26% of the vote if the other party splits more or less
massive majority
evenly.
on 34%.
That's possible. And there's a risk that could be Reform could win a majority of seats on 27% of the vote if the Tories are on 18, Labour on 19, Greens on something similar. It's possible under our system. And that's an important reason why those people who are thinking, well, we're not entirely happy with this Labour government, I'm going to perhaps as a protest vote Green or vote Liberal Democrats, etc. They should think very carefully, because that is exactly what could let Reform in. It won't be a Green government, it will be a Reform government. So sticking to the devil you know, Labour, which isn't doing as badly as some people pretend, given the circumstances in which it came to power and the dire state of the economy, that I think will enable Labour to nonetheless get back for a second term.
I feel like I need to give you, as Reformer, a quick right of reply there, Gawain, before I wrap us up.
Oh, look.
No, I thought that was my right.
It was, Richard, but I just need to make sure I'm keeping us balanced here. Very briefly, Gawain, before we run out.
With two on the centre right against me on the centre left.
I feel like there's been a bit of a gang up on Gawain as well.
The big fight the Tories have got is against the Lib Dems, and I think some of the points we've made were absolutely correct. I suspect that many of the problems of this Labour government are not those they've inherited, that they've been self-inflicted wounds, like the winter fuel allowance, like things of that sort. These are self-inflicted. The thing that really has annoyed the Labour base is what Labour has done itself, not what it has inherited. I still think that the realignment idea is stronger than this sort of this fracturing. But I think the Tory fight is going to be with the Lib Dems. If you look at where the recent opinion polls have gone, the MRP polls, the switching, for the first time we've seen that when the Tories rose a little bit in the MRP polls over the winter period, they started to take Lib Dem seats rather than those seats that are more reform-minded. And I think that's going to be an extremely interesting fight. With Labour, I think this by-election in Manchester is going to be hugely important. It's going to be a real if the Greens can pick up the Muslim vote, if the Greens can pick up disaffected youth, which they are doing in the opinion polls, then that fight is a fight for the soul of the left of this country.
Okay, well, maybe after that by-election, we might get you all back to dissect the results of it. We're out of time, so unfortunately I have to leave us there. It's been such an interesting and such a wide-ranging discussion. I appreciate your expertise across the panel on all of the topics we've touched on. Dr. Richard Corbett, former Labour Party leader in the European Parliament, Gawain Towler, political strategist and Reform UK board member, and Reem Ibrahim, political commentator. Thank you all for your time on Counterpoints. And thank you for joining us for this episode. Of course, you can catch us on YouTube at Al Arabiya English to see all of our debates and interviews, and follow us across social media platforms, X and TikTok. We'll see you next time.